Welcome to UN Insider. I'm Elaine Reyes at the United Nations headquarters in New York. Join us as we delve into the world's most pressing issues and learn how the people inside work toward a better future for everyone around the world.
Coming up on UN Insider.
Sustainable, just peace for all women and girls everywhere must be our collective priority.
Calls for equity and change.
It's a win-win. It's not that if you win, I lose. It's if you win, we all win.
From fighting challenges like poverty and climate change to shaping global institutions.
In 78 years, we have had only 4 women presiding over the most important body of the United Nations, which is the General.
A special conversation on how gender equality could change our world. Next.
Achieving gender equality and empowering women and girls. That's the mission behind Sustainable Development Goal number 5. But progress toward that goal has been slow, with factors like the COVID pandemic, climate change, and conflict around the globe. The list of challenges is growing. There is a lot of work to reach gender equality.
More than 100 million women and girls could be lifted out of poverty if government prioritized education, healthcare, fair and equal wages, and expanded social benefits.
Where do things stand and how can we make progress to close the gender gap? I sat down with Fernanda Espinosa. She's a former UN General Assembly president and served as Foreign Minister of Ecuador. Thank you so much for joining us.
Very happy to be with you again, Elaine. It's a pleasure.
When you look around the world at the future and the opportunities for young women and girls, what do you see?
Well, I see that the wisdom is there, the power is there. We have, an incredible number of very well-educated women at all levels, not only at the university level, in science, in new technologies, but on the ground, young women taking over health services and education at the community level. Wherever you look, there are young women that are super capable, fit for any challenge ahead, and yet we continue to have gaps in representation, in participation, in leadership. I think that this is a structural inequality that should and can be overcome with affirmative action, with a quota system, with changing the culture that is still, unfortunately, very much male-dominated. So it's not that we have shortage of capable women. We have a shortage in political will. We have a shortage in the way policy and legal frameworks are designed. But I am an optimist because we see things changing around the world. But we need to continue to say it, to advocate for that, and to do it hand in hand with the younger generations.
I want to get your thoughts on political will because, as you know, part of gender equality is getting more women into positions of power in politics and industry. You are a good example of that. You're a former UN General Assembly president. You're also the former Foreign Minister of Ecuador. So what advice do you have for young girls who want to be like you? And what would you say as they kind of navigate this path that is harder than for men?
Well, the only thing I can say is that persistence and resilience and effort needs to be, put in place. Often, one would think it's about merit. By common sense, women are going to be in positions of decision making. as former Minister of Foreign Affairs, but also as former Minister of Defense of my country and former President of the UNGA, you know, nothing is offered or given to you because it's common sense, because it's fair. You have, you know, to put your energy, your effort, your plan and strategy at a personal level. Sometimes we are told that, you know, oh, you have all these dreams, you are ambitious. Well, what is wrong with being ambitious? You know, we have to be ambitious and we have to work hard, because no one is going to, as my mother used to say, knock on your door and say, here's your opportunity. Unfortunately, we live in a world where you really need to, you know, fight for your dreams and be ambitious and audacious, because the qualities and the merits are often there.
Are there any measures of progress of where women stand at the highest levels of power?
Well, GWL Voices, the organization I have the privilege to lead, has produced already 2 reports, Women in Multilateralism report. The last report tells us from 54 the most important international organizations, only 13% of the time these organizations have been led by women since 1945. And 21 of these 54 organizations have never had a woman at leading. So we are promoting, of course, how to change that. We have a proposal to make. Number 1, we call the campaign on rotation for equality, which means for the presidency of the UN General Assembly, which means that in addition to the geographical rotation, you know, we should have, you know, a man and a woman each time, an alternation of men and women. So we call it rotation for equality, because in 78 years we have had only 4 women presiding over the most important body of the United Nations, which is the General Assembly. So we see that, you know, many member states are, you know, taking the idea as a good initiative. It's symbolic, but I think it's a powerful message that a gender equal international system is something that can be done when there is political will.
How do you begin changing the political will, so the structure around that, so that more women are in these positions?
Well, I think it's an effort from different angles. So you need the right legislation in place, you need the right policies in place, you need the right leaders that are feminists in place, but also you need alliances and partnerships, not only with women, but also with men, because a gender equal international system, it's a win-win. It's not that if you win, I lose. It's if you win, we all win, because we have seen what women are capable of doing when they are in positions of power. So it is about, you know, it's fair, it makes demographic sense, because we are more than half of the world's population, but it's also not about the numbers only, but it is about the quality, what we are able to deliver and do to make things go better. You know, we cannot think about a UN 2.0, a multilateral system for the future and the current challenges we face without a gender equal system. That's what Global Women Leaders Voices, the organization I have the privilege to lead, is advocating for. We work, you know, tireless with 74 leaders from around the world to make sure that we build a gender equal international system.
Today we're seeing more women and girls in the middle of conflict across the world. Gaza, for example, Ukraine, Sudan, Haiti. What are some of the conversations taking place at the UN to help these women?
Well, it's not about only helping women, it's about delivering and implementing the full women, peace and security agenda, including Resolution 1325 from the UN Security Council, which now has it's about to achieve its 25th year. And it's, of course, understanding that in situations of conflict, women and girls pay the highest price. But we shouldn't look at them as victims only. We should look at them as peacemakers, as change makers, as mediators, as key agents in any, peace process. So it goes both ways. It's understanding that yes, they are the ones the most affected in conflict. They are used as weapons of war sometimes. We have seen horrible situations of women, being abused and with sexual harassment and rape. I mean, they really are, the #1 victims in situations of conflict and forced displacement. But we have also seen, women, leading in terms of resilience, in terms of capacity to respond to the impacts of conflict, including on climate change. But we have seen, the huge difference that we see when women participate in peace negotiations, in peace agreement, in reconstruction initiatives. So women have to be, front and center of peace. I would say by nature, women are, peacemakers, peace builders. I think that any initiative regarding peace and response to conflict and prevention of conflict has to have women at the center.
Coming up.
Education is rule #1 for a gender equal society, but a gender equal international system as well.
UN Insider.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
China's poverty eradication efforts have put millions of women on more solid economic footing. And the country is expanding policies to increase women's economic rights. I asked former General Assembly President Fernanda Espinosa about China's impact in the push for equality.
China considers educational equity a basic goal and the foundation for gender equality. I want to get your thoughts on China's efforts and the importance of access to education.
Well, I think that education is rule #1 for a gender equal society, but a gender equal international system as well. More and more we see young women scientists from China. We see women diplomats making the difference in the international space. And in the international scene, we see more and more, women in positions of decision making from China. So I would say that when we advocate for affirmative action, I think that China has made big efforts towards that end, but the effort should continue. And the gender gaps should continue to be smaller and smaller in all fronts. But of course, I would say step 1 is equal opportunity in education, access to quality education, but also then access to positions of decision making. I think that's the challenge that we continue to face worldwide.
China also calls for increasing financial and technical support for women, especially in developing countries. What are you seeing there? Is that gaining more momentum, especially in other regions like Latin America?
Well, we see that we all say and advocate for example, more access to microcredit for women, support for women entrepreneurs, support for women in agriculture at the very local level. But the truth is that in terms of the numbers, women continue to be behind in terms of access to credit, for example. Not only in Latin America, but I would say worldwide. There are all these ODA programs, support and cooperation programs, to boost the economic empowerment and autonomy of women, but we're still behind. The gaps are still there. When you see, for example, on climate finance, there is a constant struggle between the amounts of money for mitigation, I mean to reduce emissions, but and the lower amounts of money and the huge financing gaps for adaptation and resilience building. And I would say that in my part of the world, in Latin America, but in the global majority countries in general, the money for adaptation is weaker, it's less, comes less often, and that affects women because they are at the forefront for resilience building. For example, in terms of food security in agriculture, women are the number one. I mean, they produce most of the food that we eat worldwide. And again, here we have the numbers. We need more investment in women, more credits for women. We need gender-sensitive budgets at the national level to make sure that resources go to women, but also capacity, but also the technologies they need. In the climate field, it's so obvious because they are at the forefront of the adaptation and resilience building efforts.
Coming up.
We want to see the faces of women in all their diversity, having a voice, having the traction, having the power to make the right decisions.
UN Insider.
I see a country on the move.
There's my opportunity.
Is it good to change so fast?
Yes, but it's a challenge.
We have one foot in the future.
But we never forget our past.
We need to talk to one another.
And listen.
More than 1 billion voices telling their stories. Rediscovering China, only on CGTN.
Climate change is one of the biggest challenges of our time. It impacts nearly every aspect of life. It even affects gender equality efforts. We continue my conversation with Fernanda Espinosa.
Are you optimistic following COP28 and already working toward COP29?
Well, we have seen, a very prominent role for women, and there is the Lima Gender and Climate Action Plan. So there is formally a process. We saw a very, an incredible amount of wise women leaders in Dubai, doing the groundwork, not only promoting their initiatives at the local level, doing the overall campaigns, but we saw women negotiators, not in the amount we would like to see yet, but women really taking the lead in climate decision making, in climate negotiations. We are also watching from the GWL Voices perspective, how many, when we looked at the leaders' family photo at COP28, we saw that there's a lot of homework to do, because we had to look for the 3 or 4 heads of state and government that were part of that picture, and the rest were men, which is, it really shows that there is a lot of work to do still. In climate negotiations, the role of women at all levels, rural women, indigenous women, women with disabilities, organizations from the grassroots, the feminist organizations, are very, very much needed. Not only because they bring solutions, and when you look at that things are moving in the right direction, you see that things are moving in the right directions also at the very local level. The power of women mayors, for example, doing things in an amazing way at the city level. You see that we are, so much needed when we're thinking about climate solutions. Climate diplomats making the difference. Climate negotiators. In climate science, we see few women, but they really make a difference. When you look at the IPCC configuration, more men than women still. So it's not saying how many the numbers, but numbers matter. Numbers reflect the way the world is working and operating. So I think that we hope that this momentum, this traction that started in COP28 in Dubai will continue to COP29 and beyond, COP30 in Brazil. We want to see the faces of women in all their diversity having a voice, having the traction, having the power to make the right decisions, because we're not doing well on the climate front. But I am, as late Kofi Annan used to say, I'm a stubborn optimist. We need to continue working, all this crisis that we are experiencing, including the climate crisis, but also the poverty and inequalities crisis. They are human creations, unfortunately. They're not natural. Therefore, the solutions have to be human as well. Human meaning from women and men taking the right decisions, not only at the government level, but at every level of governments, including the grassroots level.
You believe that climate justice is gender justice. If you can, just explain for us what that means.
Well, it means that the impacts of climate really hurt in a big way women and girls. In areas of drought and water scarcity, we have seen, the burden for women to really go and find the water for their households and their families. They have to walk, miles and miles just to bring the water home. In terms of the food security responses, either too much water or too little water. That's one of the impacts of the climate crisis. The issue of health. Women usually are, by role and nature and history, the caregivers, the ones that take care of the health of their families and communities. So they are affected more, but the solutions also come from them in most cases. So if we are thinking about climate justice, low carbon economies, low carbon societies, a complete shift in the way we produce and consume, worldwide, the role of women is of essence. It's of essence, not only because of the demographics, but because of the wisdom, the knowledge that they bring. And that happens at a very local community level, but also happens at the level of a head of state and government, at a level of a chief negotiator in COPs, at the level of the scientific evidence that we have more and more. The question, you know, I ask myself after so many years in the climate field is we are going to a COP for the 29th time and emissions continue to grow steadily. So what is that we need to do differently? And what we need to do differently is really, you know, be serious about implementing the decisions we take. And on that front too, I think women in leadership have a central role to play.
You say that a lot of work still needs to be done. What's next for you? I mean, you're a trailblazer. What more do you want to do? What more do you want to accomplish?
Well, I would say that every citizen, every woman, every person has a responsibility. I am a strong believer in responsible citizenship. We tend to say, you know, in a very easy way, it's the role of the government. The government has to solve that. The UN system is about, you know, member states taking the right decisions. I would say that the situation is so bleak and so challenging on different fronts, on the security front, on the development front, on the front of the terrible crisis relating air pollution and water, our own survival, health and pandemics. I mean, all of this is happening at the same time, geopolitical rearrangement worldwide, that responses and responsibility have to be, you know, a whole of society response. And I think that we are looking at the future with realism, but also with optimism. That's why we have high expectations of the upcoming Summit of the Future, this new pact of the future that would be, in a way, the roadmap for the future of the UN. Hopefully, you know, very concrete and workable mandates for a UN 2.0 or a UN for the 21st century. The problems and the challenges are huge, so the responses have to be innovative, creative, and really have, you know, the political vision of our leaders and societies.
Yes, for Maria Fernanda Espinosa, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Elaine. It was a pleasure, as always.
I'm Elaine Reyes at UN headquarters in New York. Thanks for being a UN Insider.
Holding guns. Words protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time?
Not at all.
Excellency, thank you very much for your time. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.